it could be that the definition of good art is how many different ideas are like layered on top of each other in a.
It's difficult to understand the modern art when you don't understand what the language the artist has used to produce that art. Standard bird, like a standard bird's natural body temperature is 104 degrees, and so then this particular oven bird can go up to like 2,000 or whatever. I haven't really decided on what its upper limits are. And but then what it will do is that because it's taken in the volcano's heat, then it like
How do you approach art?
it depends on the medium that I'm using. If I'm using visuals, then what will happen is that sometimes I'll have a thought. And then immediately after that I have that thought, then I will have an image come to my head. And so then that's like with my recent post with the goose, right? Then that's what happened. I had the thought of like a wild goose chase, and there was no, and it doesn't make any sense to have it turn into me holding a goose. And so then if I had to
Mm.
try to explain the thought with the image, then they would not necessarily be connected. But then that's how I approach art, is that the process is that my brain will take one thing from that thought and then attempt to explain the emotion perhaps or the experience of that thought into an image. And so the image is actually usually more emotional than the words are. And then but then if I were to use words instead of image, so then sometimes what will happen with my poems is that my poems are usually very visual in and of themselves. Like the words, like recently I've been thinking about it as kind of I'm painting with the words, where each word has, it's not synesthesia where the words have colors or anything like that, but the words do have a certain connotation or certain emotional color to them. And so then I'm able to pick the ones that fit together to reach a point of being visual, if that makes sense.
Well, it kind of does make sense.
Yeah.
So, like that picture specifically, when I looked at it, there was something about it that had like this very ineffable quality where it's like it felt kind of like undescribably like cute in a way, like the way that um the different characters, they're different person, like they're different, you can see their like objectives. I can't even, I try to explain it, but like I kind of thought about it a couple times, tried to think about why it was so like really interesting, but I couldn't kind of explain it. So like in music, music is an art form where there's no like implicit human meaning in music. There's sometimes like words and stuff, but like you don't have to have words. Like the words are kind of, they're on their own. So like people find music incredibly interesting, even though it's all abstract like ideas. So like when you say that you kind of paint with words, like how would that relate with that? Um, like do you ever sort of like, because you write poems as well, do you ever, you know, think about like a mood and then do a different concept and then cycle in the mood? Like that's what music does. Music is like, concept and then different thing and then like copy it and then, like kind of creates like a.
Yeah, kind of like a motif or some kind of pattern
Right.
with the emotion. Yeah, sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll write a few of the same idea in different ways and then try to figure out which one actually fits with what I'm trying to express. But when it comes to like the music and how that connects to that, mm, I mean, there is definitely a part of writing the poems where there is something that's like much deeper going on than just the picking of the words or anything like that. And so then, but then to express that into words, it's a whole process. It's really weird because the thing about words and the poems and with music is that music can convey emotion without the words, but then poems and writing you have to use the words and you have to use these preset concepts or abstractions of these concepts that turn into words. And in a way, it's like both limiting but also not limiting to be able to find those words and translate. It's really like a matter of translation of the emotion into these different mediums, whether it's visual or audio or even the written. And so then there's definitely a similarity to it.
Because there's an idea I was thinking, which is that like good art. I'm not sure if this is like a definition of like the definition of good art, or if it's just a property of some good art, but it could be that the definition of good art is how many different ideas are like layered on top of each other in a kind of uh, at the same time, because that's kind of what you see a lot of in art, where like one character will represent one thing on one level, then another thing on another level, and it will like have all this like layered integration going on. So then, if that's possibly the case in some cases, if you have some kind of visual or story form word art piece, would it be the case then that you could both do the story and then simultaneously do a musical structure to it? Because like if we find music so interesting without any grounding part of it to connect music to earth, like music is entirely alien really in its structure. Like um it's like one dimensional, and then it at like the dimensions sort of, when you interpret them, they can be in n dimensions. They have an arbitrary set of dimensions. It's not like three-dimensional space. There's like nothing in music other than language. Um so like could that be, I mean, is that, I guess that is exactly what poetry is, but what do you think about that, like those kind of concepts in relation to art?
Like, I've definitely heard myself like, there's definitely times in my life when people have told me that I speak or I consider things in a very poetic way. Sometimes they say flowery or, like, a very descriptive way, and when that happens or whenever somebody tells me that, then usually those are the moments when I find myself trying to describe many, many different things all at once and trying to find a way or metaphor, an analogy, or something that would fit over those things and encapsulate as much of that as possible. And so then it's interesting in a way because usually it's not the most positive thing to be told that in while I'm speaking, because usually people would tell me to get on with it, but then that's exactly what I'm trying to do by trying to find that one package that would fit everything together. And but then when it comes to the writing and the poetry, then that's one of the biggest things that people really appreciate is being able to see so many different connections being put together into a single unit of a poem, of a story, of a character, of all these things, of a music. And so then I think that that's definitely one of the attributes of good art. And another thing that I find to be very important with good art is that it has to be a unit. If it's too broad or too wide, then it doesn't help with people understanding what's going on inside of that image or that story. And so,
Well, okay, so
yeah. Sorry.
no, I don't want to cut you off if you had something else to say.
No.
Um, that reminds me of sort of Vervaeke's idea of how everything is relational. I don't know if you've heard him say everything is like relational. He posits, he said this in like different interviews off of the Academy. He said that like there's no such thing as an object in and of itself. Every object is in relation to another thing. Um, this was in an interview with Kurt Mongol. Um, and even if you like, think about like a math set that's an empty set or something, like there's still a way in which well, if it's an empty, like what does empty relate to? Empty, right? So like so when it comes to like that musical cohesive unit, um, I, in music, I have this kind of intuition or understanding that like there's like a musical motif, and then the whole thing has to unfold from that motif. It's not like it's not good music where you have a thing and then you have a separate thing. Like if you take a picture and you just paste another picture over top of it, I mean, it's not, unless it's like really a modern art thing, it's not going to work. So in some sense, I wonder if an art piece doesn't just have to relate kind of like from a top down perspective, but has to be in some sense unfolding from concepts or ideas to where everything follows relationally, and then those units are, I don't know, what do you think
I
about
mean,
that?
yeah, that's definitely the case. Uh, yeah, that's definitely the case because with poetry, there's a theme. Usually, there's that overarching theme, which would be the same thing as that motif, I guess, in music, and that theme would can be either the story or the particular emotion. Usually, it's an emotion. With poetry, it's usually an emotion that's trying to be conveyed, and then everything that supports that has to match that emotion. And even in writing, like when you're picking certain phrases or certain idioms or certain prepositional phrases even, then they should match that emotion. And if they don't, then it kind of falls apart and it feels weird, it feels awkward, it doesn't feel quite right. And so then there's definitely that similar function there.
How much of that is like structural and how much of that is like intuitive, like um
The best poems that I've ever read and the best poems that I've ever written are the ones where they're intuitive and not structured. Like I don't follow a formula. And the only formula that I follow would be with the haikus, where you have to follow the 575 with the syllables. But the best ones are intuitive
I
because then
I wonder though, like how would you even know if they're intuitive? Like what if they're following kind of formulas or structures which are beyond, because they don't necessarily write about how they do it.
I think the way that I've kind of been able to tell is that when something is following a pattern or some kind of structure where somebody may have been taught, oh, you should do this or you should follow these certain rules, is that everything that they write is the same or very similar to each other, and
Hmm.
it's not expansive. There's no wide scope at all. And then they just stick to one thing, and that's their one thing, that's their one niche, and then that's it. And then when it's intuitive, then usually the people will be doing all sorts of different things.
So it's like the artist kind of um gets maps for how to explore territory. They don't have formulas. It's like they have options, because various artists have different ranges in what they can do. Some artists have kind of more range. Those are, I would say, better artists, and then some artists have less range. And so, yeah, it's like the range is something they learned a certain skill. They're like, oh, like this chord works. It follows these things, or like this color can work. Normally, it doesn't work, but like this is a rule that you can kind of break, and it works in this case.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Dr. Vervaeke from earlier because that has to do with the relevance and like the salience part of it also. Because people often talk about, oh, is beauty subjective or is it objective? And, in Primacy of Beauty, in his course on Peterson Academy, he's talked about transjectivity, where it's both of them in in a cohesive way. And when we consider structure in art, then we can say that well structured art, like realism or something like that in painting, would be very objectively beautiful. Like no one can deny that it's well structured and that it follows a certain pattern, and it is considered beautiful. But does does objective beauty really hit somebody as deeply as when that art speaks to them or is experienced subjectively? Not necessarily. And that's one of the things that kind of struck me just now.
Yeah. Yeah, you took primacy of beauty. I'm like part of the way through
Mm.
it. Um, when it's is that concept of relevance realization or salience coming through in beauty, is that multiplicity or is that singularity?
I mean, that's got related to Jonathan Pageau's course, where symbolism, he defines symbolism in his course as multiplicity becoming singular and forming kind of a hierarchy of those things. And so then I would say that it's both, because that relates to the layering, the layering and the combination of so many different things together. So then you're taking all of these different things and then it's coming to a point, and then maybe that point is the point of salience where you have where you can see it, the multiplicity slowly opening up as you pick out different things from that point of salience or point of really noticing and connecting with the art piece. And then before that point, then maybe it would be, and because you need to have both of them together. And so I wouldn't say that it's one or the other, it's both, but in quick succession, where the multiplicity turns into singularity and it turns back into
Well,
multiplicity.
that's the Vervaeke model, right? The doesn't he model that out where it's like you have a set of things which get contracted down. He explains it in neural network terms as well, and then they expand out again, like but where each it's like a bunch of he describes maybe I'm incorrect because but it was like he described you know beauty as taking sort of a set of things, compressing them down, and then they re-expand in a way where you have a new set of things, but those things are um more understandable, more comprehensible, more useful.
It definitely rings a bell, but I honestly I don't quite remember that part. Yeah.
Okay. Um what do you think about this idea? This is an idea I had. I was just exploring. It's so like music, it seems, and I know you don't like music isn't your main art, but like I'm just, I think it's interesting to explore because I explore different art mediums to try to understand other ones because you can kind of like, extract out, Vervaeke says you can't get the essence of what beauty is, but that is something I'm interested in. He says you can only get like the process of it. But like because musical structure isn't like individual in like the way the mind processes things like neurologically, um like auditory things are kind of recreated as they are. Like you think about like what music is made out of. It's made out of intervals, it's made out of time, space between intervals. It's made out of these things. And like what you hear when you listen to music is those things. That's not the same thing with, for example, visual stuff. So if you see like a white square, you might interpret that as a wall. You might interpret that as like a piano key. Like it doesn't, the thing itself doesn't necessarily get a 1-to-1 ratio. Like it's the place it's in, um, changes it like inherently, like makes literally the thing mean something entirely different, which doesn't happen in music. Like things at moments have different meaning. Um, so then what it feels like is like music is kind of is it's as if um we're discovering something in music
Mhm.
versus in so like the axioms of music are something like we're discovering, like it's not something we made, it's like mathematical, it's like Pythagorean mathematical, versus the axioms of visual art in contrast are axioms that we build on top of, like it's like the whole thing exists creatively, so it's like they're going in completely opposite directions.
A little bit. There
Okay.
are definitely different things in the art where you do build off of mathematically also, because you do have like the rule of, it's kind of similar, more like you can consider it like with drawing or illustration and photography. Photography is definitely, we can understand the mathematics of it, of composition, more so in photography, because then you're dealing with all the angles, and you're dealing with the rule of thirds, and you're dealing with that kind of stuff. But then with the art, because there's so many different ways that you can represent something in the drawing and in the illustration, then it can seem like there's not a rule set, or there's a thing. Because honestly, I really don't like how modern art has taken those rules, kind of broken them apart, and said, oh, well, I can make anything, and then anything could technically be art. For me, I find that art does follow rules. Like, good art really does follow certain rules and certain things, but in different ways that doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the same.
Well, that's really interesting because theoretically, I think of modern art as being closer to music. Because, like, theoretically, it's just patterns that are in relationship to each other as opposed to images. But
Hmm.
I think neurologically it's maybe farther apart. Because this is something I thought about for a while. I was like, you know, modern art, it seems closer, but if what music is doing is it's kind of creating things of meaning, units of meaning, and then like duplicating the units of meaning, and then like proliferating, and then fractal patterns. If art's doing the same thing, then those units of meaning are they have to be like real world objects, like 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 a boy sitting somewhere has meaning, and then the ground around it and the sky has meaning because um but so you don't like modern art, but isn't modern art like almost an artist's attempt to make art have implicit meaning without um a subject, like almost like a move towards a more musical.
I think the connection is in the language aspect of arts, of all types of mediums, because something that I do notice about modern art is that they often use very vibrant colors, or kind of more primitive shapes with their compositions, whether it's like spirals or splatter marks or something like that. And it's difficult to understand the modern art when you don't understand what the language the artist has used to produce that art. If they have changed the meaning of the colors too much, then it's very hard for anybody to truly understand, because then you might interpret it a certain way, and then it's completely different. The artist comes and tells you, no, it's actually this, and that's what. But that's what it happens, is that you have to understand what the language is, I think, to appreciate the particular art form. And so then when you have the more well structured art forms, then it's easier for everybody to understand. And then that's why it can be appreciated in general, more so with the general public. And then modern art, that's why modern art tends to be kind of a niche thing, or kind of this ephemeral thing that, only a select few can understand.
Because like an artist can kind of create their own axioms, or they can be in the art world and they can create their own axioms, their own units of meaning, um, and then build from them. Like, this is something I think that happens a lot, especially in academic kind of art, where artists get in these like these worlds where the art never, art will go through many stages without ever having to be monetizable or without ever getting public critique. And so artists kind of get experimental, and then the artists kind of appreciate their own thing, and then they combine those elements in a way, but when somebody else sees them, it's so far removed from meaning that people understand that they don't understand it at all. Um, and that's possibly another component of good art, is to take ideas in a space where, uh, like, to take a reality that people can't are not experiencing, and then showing that to them before they're able to like cognitively like process.
Right.
I think that's a Vervaeke idea as well, that it's expressing it expressing like important things in, in ways that you can like reach, you can like touch, um like visual art, where maybe, there's like a world created, that the characters are kind of nothing like you. The scene is nothing like anything you've ever seen, but there's like a feeling of it being something that you kind of want to be a part of. Like you see it and you go, you go like, that's, I kind of want to embody. I want to experience that. So like art allows you to like experience something. If you see like maybe a scene with a knight and a sword attacking a dragon, you get this feeling like that's something I want to experience, even though you're not there. So it's like that would be good art, is like connecting an ineffable concept to a person, um, as opposed to alienating them because they don't understand
Definitely. Yeah.
the building blocks. I had an idea, which is that like it seems like people want to be like music. I don't know if you agree
Mm.
with that. Like people, so like
Like
you
the freedom to move.
yeah, because like you watch a movie and you want to be like the character in the movie. You see an art piece, you want to be like the character in the art piece. But you listen to music and you want to like dance, which is like to actually represent, like to like physically embody the music.
Right. Yeah. I definitely I agree with that. That Yeah, because whenever I listen to music, I definitely try to. It's not that I try to find music that speaks to me, but when it does, there's a difference between music that it's it's good music, but then it's not hitting me a certain way, and then the music that does connect with me, then that music it makes me want to it bring well, maybe it's better to say that it brings out something that I had already been thinking or something, and it puts it into words or puts it into an existence that now other that I can share with other people and say, "Oh, this is what I was talking about." And in a way, then that's kind of the reverse process where something from inside of an individual is found to be externalized in the music, and then you can share that. But then that's the reverse of experiencing music and then wanting to embody that. It's like
Hmm.
from one way to the other way.
Do you listen to music when you make art or write?
Sometimes, well, actually, no, that quite a bit of the time. Quite a bit of the time. Sometimes it's instrumental. Sometimes it's got lyrics to it. But when I get particularly involved in writing, then I will always turn it off and then just focus.
Do you think that artists are better artists when they are um equipped with as much information and like philosophical ideas, historical understanding, social understanding, or do you think an artist can be like somebody who's uncultured and just like has a intuitive feeling of art?
Hmm. I think it has to do with the experience of life. If somebody is able to experience life a certain way, where they're able to have because you can know things without having it be language. You can think about things without it being necessarily words, and then they'll be expressed in these wordless mediums of music or art or visual or sound or dance or something of things of that nature. But then if you're not necessarily somebody who's been able to experience life that way, then you would go to somebody who has experienced life and maybe read the philosophers and read the historical things. But would that necessarily make you a good artist? I think it really depends on how well you're able to connect with the life and the spirit of those people or experiences.
That's interesting because you're saying really anybody could be an artist. Um, if the artist is giving them something, don't they have to be kind of have their finger on something? They have to be like touching something, but that could be maybe intuited entirely by just being a human and then just picking up on the collective unconscious, like kind of just understanding where society's at and then just maybe creating an art piece which like shows where society's at.
Like if the person is if the artist is thinking about trying to connect with as many people as possible, then maybe that's the case. But sometimes it's the case, or a lot of the time it's the case that it is what we were talking about in the very beginning, where if that person can take all these things and put it into one salient point, which would be the art piece, then it wouldn't necessarily need or require it to be some kind of societal uh, idea that you're trying to connect with in that sense, but then it would just bring things to a point. And in a way, that's kind of how insights work, where when you give somebody an insight or you have some kind of thing where something clicks, someone's kind of into understanding clicks, and then you give that to somebody, then it's not, it depends more on the audience than it does on the artist, actually, because that insight would be meaningful to people where they've been trying to figure it out themselves. And then you would bring that one salient point that brings everything together. And then they would be able to understand, ah, yes, of course. And so then, yeah. And in that way, that insight could be an art in and of itself.
Now, this is an understanding that you picked up on from Vervaeke originally, or was this something you'd intuited before?
Uh, Intuitive, yes. I
But
picked it up
but
before.
but like not explicitly kind of articulated, or could have
Yeah.
articulated if you'd been asked to.
No, I've articulated it before.
Like the idea of
An insight, yeah.
taking a thing of meaning and then packaging it in kind of a way, not packaging it, it's not quite the right word, that
Mhm.
but like interacting with it, engaging with it
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah. I've actually articulated it in the reverse, where I would start with the package and then I would unpack it and then it would turn into a bunch of different things. Like one of the things that I do with my conversations, my kind of like closer people conversations, is that I'll start with an idea, like that will be my main topic. And then it'll seem like I'm going off on a million different tangents, a
Hmm.
million different things. And then but then I will go to their end and circle back connected. Go to their end, come back and circle back in. And then what will end up happening is that those tangents will slowly circle back all the way to the main point. And then even those tangents will start connecting to each other. Or at least that's my hope. Sometimes it doesn't work, but in my head, then that's how it works. And then from there, and so then what I'm doing when I'm explaining insights is that I'm kind of reversing that idea of bringing things together into the one thing. So instead of starting with the main point, I start with everything and then bring it back.
That's very interesting. Do you find that like when you do you find that you're writing, um, understanding plays into the way you interact with people. Like if you're writing a story and exploring different ideas or engaging with language that kind of proliferates or maybe resonates with the way that you interact with life and people.
Um, Actually, again, it's the inverse. It started with trying to talk and interact with people, and then that became the writing. So then, because oftentimes I would find that I'd run out of time with people, so then I would be trying to work all these things out, and then I'd run out of time, and then I have to take it to the notebook, and then I have to take it to the journal or wherever, and then write everything
Mhm.
out, and then that's how I developed my writing ability.
So your writing ability started from a place of like actually trying to communicate. It wasn't kind of hypothetical or like mm, abstract. It was practically directly connected.
Yes.
Do you do a journal?
Yes.
Oh, that's so interesting. I've always wanted to do a journal, but I just never. I like write one journal entry and then I don't. I lose that
And then
journal.
it's just yeah,
Yeah.
just put the silence, like, I'm not touching that for a while now.
No, I just like don't like I just forget. Like I just don't.
Ah,
It's like I don't have it always kind of like feels forced to me. Like I write it and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I don't know. I just don't think about it again, or like I just
mm,
yeah.
yeah,
But I mean, it would be nice if I had like a journal I could go back and like see like all oh, like at this
yeah.
time I was doing this.
Like, I think one of the trade-offs with writing that I've found over the years is that the time that you could spend maybe exploring the idea in real life, whether that's trying to express it in some kind of physical way or by connecting with somebody and having a conversation, is like you do have a trade-off when you write, because then that same amount of time is going to be put into the writing, and so then perhaps that's one reason why it's a little bit harder to get into the writing habit, because I feel like most people generally will choose to extend themselves outward, but writing in a way has this nature of bringing yourself into. And, depending on the kind of person, then it's like, because honestly, when I was younger, I really didn't like writing because of that feeling. I didn't like the retraction of kind of coming into myself and, spending all my time alone with my notebook and writing things out. But then I felt like I needed to do it, because if I didn't do it, then all these ideas would kind of float away into the ether and never come back.
I like there's like a couple things like writing is like a way to kind of work things out. Um like I write sometimes just to try to like work out concepts, play with ideas, keep track of things. It's like um existing in that space, but there's sometimes I also don't want to write because I want to embody the idea instead, you know, in conversation with other people. The same thing is with the music. There's this kind of balance I feel where it's like sometimes I prefer to show up unprepared to a concert, but feeling inspired because if I sit down and practice it when I don't really feel it, versus if I am like engaging with the piece, because I have this idea that like the artist, what they feel is what the person who responds to it feels, and so just like a piece kind of repeats over and over and over. If the times you engage with art, it's like a working for you, then I think that goes into the art. So like if I play music and it's just like work for me, I think that that's what other people hear. But if I only play music when it's like engaging and exciting, I think I'm like integrating that excitement into the music. So I'll show up to sort of like, you know, I guess events where I'm playing music and I'll be unprepared, but I
Mhm.
feel the music is more alive then. Maybe I'm
Right.
maybe I'm incorrect, but that's what I do.
Yeah. Like, I usually just label that as the spontaneous side of art, where you just go into it and you're just really into it, and then you don't know why, you don't know how, it's just it's there. It's the connection. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I
And
feel
then
it. You go.
oh, no, no, you go. I was just gonna add a little tiny thing. It's okay.
um, I feel the same way with conversations where I feel that people listening to people talk, like conversate, is far more interesting generally than if somebody prepares something and then shares it with you. That's what I that's what I think. I think it's because it's like um m- yeah, I mean that's maybe a bit tangential to art, but
Well, I mean, talking is an art, though. You do have to practice it. It's still a skill. So
right.
it's true. Conversation is an art in an art form of and of itself. In and of itself.
Right. Well, yeah, maybe I'll bring it in then just because it's maybe an idea that can yeah, relate to other art forms as well. But I'm thinking like uh, so like when people sit down and they prepare something, a lecture, it's very concise and some people do it amazingly to where I would say it's equal to conversation, but I think that's very very difficult. But when people prepare something, I think that they're accounting for like information as being kind of a unit by itself in a way. Now, people do build up abstract things, but I think that what happens in a conversation is that because you're engaging with a person dynamically, you're placing the information at the right time to where, like, in the conversation, it builds to a point where that information then, boom, it lands. And then the person who's listening to it, they like, it like hits them deeper because they saw where it fit versus like if the person's thinking about it on their own and they go, oh, this is brilliant. I'll just share it. The person's not able to see the crescendo and then like the hit where the yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's like one of the best things about conversations for me is but the thing is that there are different people, in my experience, that there are different people who want to have the ending in the beginning, and then maybe they'll listen to the rest of it. And then there'll be people who really appreciate that building and the rise, and then you get to the point and it's like great for them. And so then I've experienced both types of people, and they can become a little bit frustrated when one side when they're not getting the thing that they're expecting. And I think that's really interesting too.
Wait, what do you mean by that? Like in a conversation, somebody is wanting to get to the point. Is that
Mhm.
what you mean?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, and then when I don't get to the point and I want to build up and I wanna build up and then and then it just doesn't land. Even if I get to the point, then it might not land for that person.
Hmm.
But then if I had gotten to the point first and then kind of explained it, then it lands better for those kinds of people as well.
I think maybe for that reason, that's why I like at the beginning of this conversation, I felt like I just said everything I was like kind of wanting to say initially because I didn't want to I didn't want it to feel like I was like holding on to something and then not sharing what I was most in thinking about in the moment. Um, I had an idea like for talk shows where like talk shows they'll oftentimes like have a note where they'll like look down and they'll get notes to like to say to the thing. But I think that that's talk shows are now not as interesting to people. But I think if they like literally said what they were engaging with, it would be more interesting. I think there's something about a person like doing something that you don't know what they're up to where it like breaks the connection, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if you agree, but like that's where I'm like saying in relation to that, where like if I feel like I have something I'm building to, I don't think I can do that because then I feel like I'm doing something sneaky. Like I'm not like I'm hiding something,
Oh,
if that
right.
makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, but there's things that are always hidden, but I feel like the yeah. that's maybe, I mean, that's my approach, but
I mean, that's kind of interesting because my original see, I've had to learn how to because of my experience with people wanting two different things and two different ways of having a conversation. My natural inclination is to get to the point and then build. But then I actually had to learn the other way of building slowly and building and kind of expanding the world and then coming to that point where like, yes, this is my point. And so then I understand what you mean by it feels kind of like you're not being clear. Like it can seem like you're not being clear with your point when when you're doing the building thing and you don't just get to the point. But at the same time, I'm like that build. I always see the build as like a soft landing rather than a crash landing in a way because then you are coming down at that angle so that you can have the point literally land in that metaphor
mhm,
while the other one is more like no I'm just going to hit you with it. And
mhm.
I personally prefer either which way. I find that that's interesting because if they get to the point right immediately, then it build in a way it gives the conversation some structure. It gives it that starting point. It gives it an anchor point, and then we can build off from there. But then if they build up slowly, then I can be able to connect a little bit more, and it feels almost kind of more organic in a way, or like more natural in a way to kind of see where it's going, see how it's growing.
Well, like, like I was saying, music ha music seems to be pure abstract patterns, like, just raw abstract patterns. I think the reason we like music is because it's literally just, literally patterns that are happening deep in our mind that are way unconscious, but they are patterns which are interesting. Um, and that pattern exactly, that, like, build-up thing is incredibly musical. That's what music does. The distinction, though, I guess, that I feel with that, though, is that in music, it's building because it can't do the thing unless the context is there. But while it's building, good music, those building moments are in and of themselves incredibly meaningful. So, like, a modulation in music where like a key changes and then it's just like, incredibly interesting. It's like, well, it has to play it in the first key for the modulation to be interesting because then when the modulation hits, you're like, whoa, what is, like, all these patterns are now reinterpreted to mean something different.
Right.
So you're writing a story.
Mhm. Yeah. So then, what do you want to know about it?
Um well, I like the premise a lot. So the premise is that it is um there's creatures that exemplify that are like like magic potions kind of almost in this
A little
story.
bit, yeah. Yeah. The one aspect of it is definitely that with especially the insects. The
Mhm.
insects, I was thinking about that. But I guess the premise of the story, like if I had to bring it back out to the wider scale of the wider scope of the story itself, I would say that the premise is actually kind of more it's not exactly I don't want to say that it's a hero's journey because I don't really unless it becomes that way, but it is more about the journey of life itself. As you go about life, what is that like? And what would happen if that journey became integrated imagination and it didn't lose that imagination and it remained as as creative as possible but still remaining within the bounds of life in a way. And so then that's why when I was developing the magic system, then the magic is not breaking physical laws. It's not like I said before, it's like you need there's no intent to put in incantations or spells or anything like that. But it's mostly based on writing something that would be interesting for all ages, where if you can, because the idea behind the potions is like the pharmaceutical thing, where you take a lot of different chemicals and a lot of different things from insects, from plants, from these kind of herbology and these studies, and then you can produce medicines and other things. But then instead of making it just science, cold science, then it's more of an ecosystem of ideas, rather than just we'll just make medicine and that's it. So there are a bunch of different characters that I'm formulating that really bring that out and really exemplify. Some of them are non-human, some of them are human, and some of them are animals, and it's a lot of fun actually to write this out.
Wait, what do you mean by like it's like real life, but also like maintaining the dream aspect of it? Is that what you said, or something like that?
Something like that. But what I mean by that is that that's a good question. Let's just start there. That's a really good question. What do I mean by that? It's like if you could remain, it's kind of like it almost is like that, because with the dreams, like especially after going through the dreams course and learning about how a REM sleep and how the mind formulates different answers and processes different things in unusual ways, then it's like the idea, the world building, like the foundation for this world is that it is real life. It is not overly fantastical. It's not overly, things are happening that don't make sense or anything like that, but everything is an attempt to make sense. But then things are happening in a way that you wouldn't expect it to work necessarily in real life, or in ways that in a way that it combines different aspects together in a way that feels dreamlike or feels fantastical. I don't know whether or not how fantastical, but
Hmm.
it's definitely it's like that.
I got distracted. I was just thinking about the layout. I wasn't sure. Hmm. I got distracted. I missed what you were saying, kind of.
Oh, that's okay. But I guess just to repeat it, then
Yeah, could you
yeah,
repeat it?
yeah, sure I can. So then it's like it's real life. It's based on the foundation is definitely real life. It's not too dreamlike. It's not too fantastical where things are happening and you can't make sense of it. And there are a bunch of like plot holes or magic holes where how does this work? How does that work? But everything builds towards the dreamlike construction of solutions to the world, where different things will happen in it that will represent issues or situations. It's really hard to explain
I think I
because
do know
it
what you're saying. I mean, I
yeah.
really like the idea. That's why I wanted to hear you explain it, because it sounds well, like what I initially thought is what you're kind of explaining is that
Mhm.
kind of thing. It's like maybe this is not correct, but it's almost like if you're in real life and then the imaginal like dreaming stuff that you do to think that kind of manifests in a real way. It's like expressed in a real way as opposed to those thoughts being entirely just ethereal uh in thought space,
Yeah,
possibly.
exactly.
I,
Yeah.
I wonder if like the insects, because like you described like the firefly um
Mhm.
is like fire, and then the lightning bug is like lightning, I think.
Yeah, thunderstorms, yeah,
Thunderstorm.
thunderstorms and strong electrical currents.
I wonder if is there also like insects that have more classically medical or scientific rather effects?
I believe so, but yeah, there are definitely going to be certain ones that are going to be like that.
Because
Mhm.
I always find imagery so interesting because it's where it feels like so many things can be stacked up on top of each other. Because in imagery, you have something which represents something, and then like all the metaphors and stuff that like kind of emerge from that. Um, but like you had some level of kind of privacy on to what degree you were going to talk about the story.
Mm.
So how much of it will you talk about? And
I mean, it really depends on what kind of questions you ask, because there are certain things about like different character stories that I might hold back a little bit of it or a bunch of it, depending on how in depth you'd want to explore that. Just because then I'd basically be telling you the story verbal or orally, and
mhm.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah.
but it really depends. Yeah.
Well, what are the characters? Some of their goals. Can you say that?
Well, the first part of the story is introducing a couple of like I have an idea for the mainline story where it's going to be centered on one character, but then to begin to introduce the world to people, then I'm going to have kind of more like a prologue story, or it's kind of like this story before where it introduces two side characters of the mainline story. But in this prologue, then one of them will be a main character, will be the main protagonist of the story, and then the goal for that story is actually quite intense, because not in an action way, because I don't see this becoming anywhere close to action or thriller or anything like that, just kind of straight fantasy adventure. And the I guess you could say the philosophical premise of it is the question of what can you do with both living life in action and experiencing life through the written. And and it's kind of like an exploration of that kind of question. And then that formulates the goal of that's that character that I'm writing about, where he represents one side of that question, and then another character will represent the other side of the question, and then we'll see how that works.
How is there a writing component to it? Like you're writing it, but are they also
Yeah.
writers in the story or what?
Only in yeah, there's definitely an aspect of it. There's an element of characters being writers in this story, in this world.
So wait, so I'm trying to understand that. So it's wait, could you explain that exact philosophical thesis of it being something also
Right. So
written?
then,
What part of it's
right.
which?
And so then one character has so then the premise is what I guess you could I'll put it like this. It's like which one it's not which one is better or which one is like the one that you should do, but it's more like how do they interact with each other, and how do they
Really?
build off of each other. Yeah.
But
It's like
how on earth do you express that though? Like, do you show the reader what the one character is writing to? Because if it's a play between one character's writing of something, and another character living something,
mhm.
how do you see that?
And so then the main character doesn't know how to write. He's exploring life, he's on a journey, he doesn't know how to write, he doesn't know how to read. And so then he's living life in action. And then essentially he comes across somebody, and that person starts asking him questions about what he's trying to do on this journey and what's going on, and realizes that this guy doesn't know how to read or write, and tells him, okay, well, if you're trying to live life a certain way, then you need to know how to read, because you're missing worlds of information, like worlds of experience that you would never have, that you can't live in action. And then that's how it will develop. And then so then throughout the story, then it's not so much that the one character's a writer and the other one isn't. One character is being taught how to read and understand the worlds that he's missing, in a way, is the idea.
Well, but how do you show the reader of your book the stuff they're reading in the other stuff, or is it inferred? Is it like this person read this and then they had this understanding?
The idea that I had, because this is kind of like the idea in development is that the main character would have an experience with reading something, like once he learns how to read, and then he would have an experience and then it connects to his original philosophy of living life in action, and then that would, in theory, bring out that
Mm,
ability of him to understand the written in very much the same way as he experiences life originally.
that's very cool. That's like that idea of having a concept and then kind of like iterating out on it because you're kind of then analyzing the way writing has an impact on people because you're starting at a point where somebody didn't have any access to it and then just seeing how their life unfolds as a result of that.
Yes, exactly.
It seems like though in a fantasy world, that's almost anachronistic. That's maybe not the right word, but it almost feels like it's out of place because fantasy worlds oftentimes express ideas that are abstract and complex through abstract complex scenarios and creatures um like like in a fantasy world, I would think people would be less motivated to read because the world itself is has those layers of information in them.
Mm.
Or is that maybe a misunderstanding?
It's interesting because the premise of the main story, the reason why that prologue kind of came into my mind as a good idea, let's put it that way, as a pretty interesting idea to explore, was because the mainline story is centered kind of like I'm not sure how it went from one thing to another thing, but when I was trying to write the main, like I had started trying to write the main story first, but then I realized that I was missing some context of certain ways that this world works, and I needed to think of something that would explain it without the exposition. So I wanted it to be its own thing, and that's kind of how the prologue came into existence in in formulation. But then the mainline story, the premise of that is that it's kind of like the inverse of that, where we're starting with a situation where somebody knows how to write and she's going through the world trying to understand life in action. And so then that was kind of like the idea of seeing the two sides of it and then flipping it. And so then what happens if you have somebody who needs to go on that adventure of life and who needs to experience that life in 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 action. And then that was the mainline story, but it just started feeling a little bit too meta in a way, kind of like that's kind of it's a little bit difficult for me to write. I think that's one of the biggest problems with writing the stories, that it's kind of you're writing about writing a little bit, and it's a little bit convoluted, and that's one of the reasons why it's a little bit difficult to write for me, because I do recognize that it is a little bit, it's stacked in a way that isn't quite like it's not. It's like that. It's
What like could you describe kind of that what that challenge is like?
sure. Oh man. Uh, it's like that challenge. I think some of the challenge has to do with recognizing that you know what you're doing when you're writing a story. You know what you're doing because you're the one who's writing it, so you have all the little interior details of how it is. But then you get into a thought process of, yeah, but if somebody wants to like kind of tear it apart a little bit, then they're like, oh, you're writing about writing, and it kind of messes with the mood that I'm in, so to speak. Like I'm excited, and then something comes and kind of like, well, I mean, how interesting is this going to be? Well, I want to try to make it interesting, and then that's the challenge, that kind of internal conflict of like, one side is kind of like going, I don't know about this, and the other side's like, no, it's a great idea. Let me try it.
Well, okay, two different separate ideas. One is sort of C.S. Lewis's idea. I think maybe you've experienced the same um, with with C.S. Lewis that I have, but he said something like, "Don't try to make something original. Don't try to like not copy something. Don't try to like actively not copy something. Don't try to make it original. Just write, you know, and then it will be original." Which,
Right.
you know, that idea seems directly applicable. The other idea is like this kind of reorganization or repath direction idea, because I have like the same issue in computer programming where like I start building something and then I start seeing kind of the flaws. But, I've been doing it for a while, kind of building these different things, and I do switch. Like I switch automatically, but I switch when I find something that's better. I'm like, mm, one idea just it stacks more things. I feel like it's fitting more of my skills. So I'll switch to it, like not because this thing is bad, but because this thing is I'm just like, well, this one is doing more things simultaneously.
Mhm. Right. And so then was that kind of like kind of getting out of the frame of one project, then going to another project, and then going back to the other project, or
Like, does that get it out of the frame for me? Well, if I feel like I'm not doing the optimal thing, then I want to be doing the optimal thing.
Mhm.
So like if I mean, yeah, I'm always trying to find the most optimal thing and then do it, which is different than maybe it's different than what you're saying, or maybe it's not. I just don't know. Like I don't know like to if it's something where it's like it's something where you kind of look past the issues, or if it's something where you course correct.
right. And I think, just to kind of go a little bit off topic, then bring it back, is that the biggest thing that I've noticed that's different between writing poetry and writing prose or a story is that poetry is a single thought. It's a single unit. Usually I can write one thought in as little space as possible, and that's it. The difficulty that I have with prose is that, well, one, I haven't really done a whole lot of prose writing. And the second thing is that it attempts to take in a thought and then expand it out across time into a timeline with characters and a world, and it's makes it both more complicated but then a little less complicated, because you would think that there should be some kind of direction with the characters, like there should be some kind of development of the characters, or there should be a development of the world depending on how you're going about it. But I think like one of that's the hardest thing for me to overcome with writing the story, is trying to figure out how to stay on this one thought for long enough that I can develop it and make it interesting, and make it, well, I'm not trying to make it interesting, but to reveal why I found it interesting in the first place. Because if I found it interesting enough to have an entire idea about it, then surely there's something there to explore.
Well, what's the challenge with staying on one thought?
Is that it turns into a million other thoughts, and that's the part.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Where you just
it's
basically you just like get sidetracked. You find things that are very interesting and engaging, and then you want to jump in on those things.
yeah, exactly, and then it kind of slightly derails it, and then I'm not writing the story anymore. Now I'm exploring this part, or I'm exploring that part, or there's a new character now, and it's then how do you tie everything back together again? That's the hard part.
That's interesting. If I did that in programming, I'd be so happy with myself, because in computer programming, like everything I make, I can then keep and then use for something later. Even if it's something trivial on the side, I can then like re-engineer it. So, but I don't find I do that as much. I find that yeah, it's probably quite a different medium though. Do you think you can do the same thing to some extent with writing, where like even when you have that fear of like, what if the concept itself isn't good? I think the concept is really good. I'm just saying that like me saying that doesn't affect your experience with that fear. But so do you then think to yourself, well, I can, even if this one, even if I change the concept or something, like I can use scenes in writing, like are scenes or concepts or characters reworkable?
Yeah, yeah. I just would never know how it would actually work out because I did have the experience. It's really funny though. I was writing the story, right? And it's just as an example of this kind of idea of having something I write it and then it doesn't work and I have to scrap it or I have to put it to the side and not actually attach it to anything. But it so then I had this scene where one of the characters is walking and it comes across a sign and a wooden sign. It has some writing inscribed into it. But then I thought, I don't want to use English. I don't want to use English at all because that's hard to, scratch into a piece of wood. And so then what ended up happening was that I may have scrapped the idea, like I took it out of the story because it wasn't flowing well. But then what that caused me to do was create my own language. It's like I spent 40 minutes just scratching out symbols and ideas, and it was like, oh my gosh, this actually worked. And then spent another 2 weeks, and now I have something that I'm going to be using probably forever. And that's a really interesting example of that phenomenon of writing something, not having it work out, but then it makes something completely different, and it's like, okay, great, now I've got something really cool.
It's a very clear
That's not
example of that.
necessarily. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Uh, okay.
Um, are you more of a Tolkien or a C.S. Lewis fan?
Okay, well, that's just kind of funny because for as much as I write and as much as I talk about art and poetry and all that, I don't actually do a lot of reading. So then I read The Lord of the Rings once when I was, I don't know, 14 or something, and I didn't really
Hmm.
get it. And C.S. Lewis I've never read except for just recently. So I have no idea whether or not one or the other. Though my sister read Tolkien recently and it was hilarious the way that she was telling me about it, but I mean, so then I'd have to read them to find out.
Well, then, what about maybe just one concept? Because I'd recently learned that basically Tolkien didn't like the way that C.S. Lewis wrote because he felt that the characters weren't plausible in their environment because they're kind of not like C.S. Lewis's character is like a faun. It's just a person with legs. It's just a person with like,
Mm,
you know, deer legs or whatever. Versus Tolkien, it was like if there's a character, you have to explain its entire backstory. You have to explain its entire like history, everything. So C.S. Lewis basically just like kind of takes a abstract concepts, puts it in characters, and just like it's like extreme fantasy versus Tolkien like makes it plausible fantasy. So like which are you more inclined to?
I mean, I would probably say Tolkien, but only because kind of out of habit. I'm in the habit of having things make sense because when I don't make things make sense, then it's kind of like that I have all the questions. Everybody's asking questions about, well, how does this work and how does that work? And so then I found myself drifting more toward the having everything make sense, make it easy for the reader to kind of make sense of the world.
There is something to kind of not sharing artistic ideas because then they I think there's a creative space where the creative space is distinctly different than the sort of rational space where you want things to exist in the creative space like maybe without touching reason a bit like so if you have something and you're thinking like okay I gotta like create something from this you can like creatively go maybe one iteration and then check it for plausibility or like effectiveness and then find an error and then you go back down versus the more creative system is you build out really really far without like grounding and then you have a potentiality to find something that you couldn't have found if you were sort of checking the plausibility
Mm,
first.
right. Yeah, I mean, usually I definitely trend toward the more creative way of handling my ideas, where I'll just start somewhere and just kind of let it become whatever it's going to be, and then uh, do that. But it's weird because it's like that's how I naturally do it, but then I've learned how to do it the other way where I now have this really bad habit of editing while I'm writing when I should just be doing my mental dump, just dump everything, dump every idea, doesn't matter what it looks like, whether or not the grammar's right. But then I have this horrible bad habit of going back and editing it in the moment, and I've run into problems with that. And that's
Hmm.
it's like I should not do that,
Okay, well,
but I do it anyway.
that's interesting because I have like mixed feelings on that. I wouldn't say I'm so against it because I like really like. Oftentimes, it's just like messages to forum post or stuff. But like when I'm writing, I really like actually like working out a sentence, almost like composing it, where like I make this one and then this one like follows it, and this one follows it, as opposed to like filling a page and then going back and editing it. Like I like kind of like doing that.
Mm.
Do you think that's like a bad, like
No, I think
necessarily bad?
I agree with you. I like doing that more. I wish I could do that, but I've built the bad habit. The bad habit is the editing. The editing where I will have my thing written out and then I'll start, fixing it or whatever instead of it
Mhm.
just remaining as its organic original.
Right, right. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, even that though, that's what I'm talking about. Like that's part of it to me because like I'll like write something and then I'll be like, you know, going back looking at it, seeing how this fits, and then kind of adjusting the whole thing to make it kind of like more cohesive. And then the next one, like I like editing it. I don't think about it as
Uh,
bad. Like even like while I'm doing it, but maybe
yeah.
that's considered bad practice.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's a bad practice. It's just that I spend way too much time. It's personal. It's a personal
Hmm.
opinion where I end up spending way too much time on it, and then it starts getting a little bit like that nervous of like, it's is this the right, where it gets in my head? That's why it's a bad habit for me because it turns into this concept of did I do too much? Did I not do enough? Or is this my original point? Is what am I focusing on? And then it gets in my head, and then that's why for me it's a bad habit. I wouldn't say that it necessarily applies to anybody else.
Do you have like little chunks of writing that you are just like you just love the way they're like artistically put together, or like there's maybe blocks of writing that you're like, ah, it's good, but maybe it's more about the story. But then you have like little check sections where you're like, I put a lot of heart into this, and it.
Yeah, I definitely have a bunch of those lying around. And I've been starting to kind of collect them again because usually they'll come out randomly when I'm journaling or something like that, and it'll just be like this one chunk. Where I'm like, wow, that's amazing, and then it kind of gets lost in the writing, and then I have to collect it. But I definitely have those. Yes.
Mm, uh, what would be like maybe a scene from your book that would be really interesting, or maybe like what's the most fantasy like scene, the most fantastical, otherworldly type of thing that can happen in that environment?
I think it's going to be one of those. It's going to be far into the future of it, but there's going to be an integration. It's like I was so inspired by like hearing Carl Jung's shadow integration thing that there's an entire section of that story that's going to be involved with going into not a shadow realm, but like that if the original world was already kind of a little bit on the dreamlike side, then going into that realm to solve a problem will be probably the most fantastical part of it.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
What is that like a bit, like the shadow realm?
Raw, very emotionally raw. I will probably it will end up being where I'm not going to be trying so hard to make things like generally consumptive. Like it'll have parts where I don't know how the reader will take it, but it's that realm of exploration.
Very much like the shadow, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Could you give like maybe a high level example of what that would like? How do the characters interact with that? Like they themselves a- act out as if they're a shadow, like they're like
Uh,
the shadow of a individual, or
well, I actually have a different story that I was working on that it kind of follows that premise a little bit closer. But in the particular fantasy story, how would it work out? It it would be yeah, I haven't actually gotten that far into
Mhm.
the idea concept, but so I can't give any real example, but that's the idea.
Is there always a consistent physics to your world, or is there also like a dream-like kind of place?
I think there'll be consistency. Yeah. Yeah. Though like there it's going to be mostly consistent and then there might be certain areas of the world that have slightly stretched but still within the parameters.
The parameters basically of our world, right?
A bit. Our world plus imagination, making it
Hmm.
magical.
Right,
Yeah.
right. What are the like other kind of magical creatures?
Well, one of my favorites. So then there's this area where there's like a volcano, and one of my favorites is so in real life we have something called an oven bird. An oven bird in America is this little warbler that will make a little nest in the grass and it'll look like a little oven, so that's why they call it an oven bird. But in this world, the oven bird that I created a long time ago is that this kind of like terracotta colored creature, this terracotta bird, and it likes bread. And since it lives in the volcanoes, its body temperature can rise up far greater than any standard bird. Like a standard bird's natural body temperature is 104 degrees, and so then this particular oven bird can go up to like 2,000 or whatever. I haven't really decided on what its upper limits are. And but then what it will do is that because it's taken in the volcano's heat, then it likes bread. And so then the idea is to integrate it into so then if somebody comes over and then you have bread, then they'll become your friend essentially, and then they'll follow you. And then if you have a little like a pizza, you can imagine a pizza oven, right? It's that kind of semicircle shape. Then they'll kind of slot themselves in there, and then you can and it'll help you with making bakery baked goods and stuff because they love bread so much. I don't
The
know.
the oven
It's
bird is like a bird though. It's not a person. So
yeah, it's a bird.
why does the person like bread in relation to the oven bird?
Oh no, the oven bird likes bread, and so then if once you understand what the oven bird likes, then you can become friends with it that way. So then the person may not necessarily like bread, but if they need that bird for some reason, then they can trick the bird into coming or befriend the bird depending on what kind of person
You say befriend
wants.
like it's more than like we do in this world. Like befriend it almost like it has autonomy. Because in our world, it's like you kind of I guess you can befriend birds a bit. Is it like that
Mm-hmm.
basically?
Mm-hmm. Because in real life, what people will do with birds is that with chickadees or blue jays or something like that, then if you come back a certain way and slowly feed them, then they will land on you. They will come back to you and they will become more comfortable with you. Like in a way, you can slightly domesticate even wild birds in that way. So it kind of follows that idea.
Oven bird. For some
Mm-hmm.
reason, it feels almost um like it could be in the oven. I don't know why I'm visualizing that. Like it could be in the oven with bread because it can handle such high temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of
Yeah,
thought that is it.
that's exactly the visualization. Yeah, and that's why I love it so much because it's just so cute. And I'm
That
like,
is so
yeah.
cute. It's like your it's like your Canadian goose kind of.
Yeah. Mhm. Exactly, with it's a little anger. It's like, "Put
Mhm.
me down, human." No. It's like, "I'm not
Yeah.
putting you down."
How many different of those elements do you incorporate? There's like different senses. There's something that artists do that like I don't like, but I kind of understand where artists will incorporate disgust elements. And I think the reason they're doing that is because it's like they're they're bringing their audience to a place of like different emotional experiences so the artist the audience is like feeling something. I don't like it. That's the only reason why I think people do it because I'll see something and it's just like purely disgusting. I'm like, but why did you make it so extra disgusting? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I don't like that either. I'm not
Right.
planning on adding any of that either.
Okay. I
Like
like
unless
that.
unless I'm
But
specifically like I put it this way. In a way, I know how to write horror stories, but I don't like horror stories. And unless I'm like really trying to express some kind of thought or emotion, like
right.
unless there's a really like a specific point to it, then I'm not gonna do it.
Right. Maybe the reason they do it is like if they have a villain, they want the person to feel deeper than hatred for it. But I got derailed. But what I was wondering is like how many of those different components do you incorporate? I think like maybe different writers have a range because I feel like some writing uh I I think cuteness is something that's rarely incorporated. I don't know. I just don't see it that much. I'm not a big reader either, but it
Mhm.
feels, like do you have like those kind of different things you can pull out, like maybe a feeling of love or suspense and like those different, or I guess cuteness would be analogous to that. It'd be more like beauty. I don't know.
I don't know. The cuteness is its own thing almost. Yeah. But yeah, there's definitely I've definitely I think the way that I'll do it is with each character. Each character won't necessarily represent a particular thing, but then part of their story will show that aspect of some way. So then like but I'm not sure how I will actually do it. Like I know I've tried it, I've tested it, I've been able to do reach that effect of eliciting certain emotions or certain experiences, but I don't know how I'm going to put that all together in this particular story. So then they're kind of going back to those little chunks of writing that I really love. It's like those are the chunks where I've tried those things and I was able to get it, but it's nowhere close. Like it's nowhere going to be close to becoming any kind of full story. It's just this one little chunk of writing.
You have a bunch of little chunks which are not integrated to this whole story, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yes.
And the oven bird is kind of one of those at this point.
Uh, the Ovenbird's kind of like that little side character. Like if you can imagine, like one thing that I really like is when certain books, like they have so much in the world that they have to have like the little guidebook to it, where they
Yeah,
explain
yeah, yeah.
these ideas. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's where you would probably learn what the Ovenbird is about. Like you'll kind of get an idea of it. It won't be explicitly explained, but then maybe a scene will be described where the bread will have a feather, and you're like, why does it have a feather on it? Well, because the oven it was cooked with an oven bird. The oven bird cooked it.
That's really good. Um, that's something I really love about worlds. I mean, it's a feeling of like real depth. That's I was wondering because when I read your some of the descriptions you gave, some of the elements sounded a bit like video games a little bit. Um,
A little bit, yeah.
that's something about Minecraft that I loved, which is that when I play Minecraft, I would then go online and look up how does this things work. The world itself is so complicated that I would have to like do my own research, and I think that's exceptional. Do you
Yeah.
have like is there like a game inspiration, video game inspiration in your writing?
Not directly, but definitely growing up with stuff like Pokemon, it definitely helps with the animal aspect and like certain books like Redwall or these animal where the animals have a personality to them, then those are definitely larger inspirations of why it's taking this shape.
The thing I was thinking was kind of like a video game was like how Um, there's like insects that you can like use, which is strikes me as kind of video game-ish because I'd never heard of that concept before where there's animals where you can use them, but in video games there's elements that you can use, but I guess that's maybe indirect, like it's not you didn't you didn't take that from video game kind of building. I mean,
No.
no video game has that. I'm just like it kind of
Uh,
reminds me of that.
but yeah, I haven't taken that from any particular video game or anything. I mean, I do play some things, but definitely not in this particular way.
Mhm.
Yeah,
What do you think like writers uh uh it seems like there's so much that's changed so rapidly. It seems like the trajectory of the planet is just like, accelerating like a asymptotic curve essentially.
mm,
Um wha- how do you feel that like all the different elements that are now in the world influence writing? Because like video games is something I was just speculating. I'm like, maybe this is something which then plays into your writing. Like there's world building in video games, and then that goes into writing, but maybe not. But like, are there things because of the new technology we have that go into that?
that's that's an interesting question because what one of the it's like yes, but in different ways because the thing that always comes to mind when somebody talks about like the way that the world is going and it's always going to be the AI or like the AI, the topic of AI and how it's being used and all that. Because one of the things that I particularly don't like is the reliance on these kind of machines. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do with whatever I wrote was that it has to integrate kind of a natural aspect of life, like some kind of experience that people actually experience. And I don't want it to be so focused on connecting so to speak with like the zeitgeist or like the way that the world is in its current state because there are certain things that are just timeless experiences or timeless phenomena that everybody has noticed or everybody has seen a glimpse of, and I wanted to like draw that out. But then in writing in general, I think that the way that technology develops does affect how people process these ideas because then the metaphors change, the analogies change, the way that people can kind of comprehend ideas change according to the developments of these things. And so I don't think there's any way to what's the word to avoid that to avoid that the adaptation of these ideas to how we've developed technologically or scientifically. But in that same way, I don't. Like it really depends on how you do it. But for me, I just kind of I separate myself from that kind of upward trend into the more technology. So I find myself not really interested in the sci-fi things or the scientific fantasy. I mean that's the same thing. But yeah, but there's definitely an influence, and it could go either way depending on what a person wants to do with it.
Is there a shadow
With it.
element like of technology that gets projected onto the living creatures? Like you have kind of everything is kind of organic, but do the organic elements in some way have a shadow of our society? So, just like an example of like
Oh,
maybe
I
what I'm
see.
trying to say is like, but we have technology, which is a phone. Like, is there like an insect that you, or like a bird that you call to like send a message? I would say that's like it's taking the place of something that we have, but
Yeah.
organic.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, I do like the idea of having the birds sending messages. So like usually it's like in real life it would be pigeons, but pigeons and doves have a different role in my world, so then we wouldn't necessarily use that. But it's kind of like the owls or these fast birds like raptors, owls, that would be sending the messages. And then there, I did have an idea of kind of seeing what would happen if I tried to integrate some technology into it, but it may or may not work. So then it's kind of one of those distant ideas.
Okay.
But definitely, yeah, but definitely there are going to be replacements for these ideas.
When you're like writing, do you get extremely excited sometimes when you like figure stuff out or like have an idea? This is what I find when I'm working on stuff. Like generally it's pretty normal, but sometimes I'll have an insight or I'll yeah, related to insight, I come to an awareness of something and I just get really it's very exhilarating essentially.
Yes, definitely. And sometimes it gets a little bit. Sometimes it gets to the point when I have to go downstairs or wherever I am writing, and then I'll go and find somebody and be like, "Oh my gosh, I found out this really cool idea. Let me tell you about it." And then they're just like, "Nah." It's like they accept the outpouring. They accept the outpouring graciously.
Mhm.
Hmm.
That's like yeah, because it has to be contextualized right. They have to understand kind of like why. I mean, that's kind of one of the biggest challenges I find with big ideas is that like even if you have like a really fantastic, like brilliant understanding of something, that understanding is all based on like abstract concepts below it. And if somebody doesn't have those abstract concepts, they're missing maybe a couple. You share the idea with them, it just like falls. It doesn't land. And
Right.
so and then like the other problem is it's like, well, okay, well then explain the other abstract concepts. But the person never sees in the first place why it's engaging. So then you're like, oh no, I can explain why it's and they're like, uh, I don't think this is interesting.
Exactly, and that's what I was describing earlier with the upwards and the downwards, like, when you have your idea, and then you give you somebody the idea, and then you have to explain it, and then the other
Hmm.
people who are like, "Oh, I'll take the explanation first, and then reach that." That's exactly it.
Right. Can you tell me more about the like just like different things that are happening in your writing world?
Oh, different things in my writing world, huh? Like, r right. Oh, sorry,
Oh, I
you
just had
go.
an idea. Yeah. Um,
Mhm.
is there something you can like an example of like one of those things where you kind of were exhilarated when you thought of it and then you shared it and it kind of didn't land? I mean, it's kind of like asking for the worst thing, but I'm just curious.
Ah,
If not, go with what the other thing you were thinking.
yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's like this particular story, I haven't really shared it a whole ton with other people, and part of the reason is because it's been very slow going. It's been very slow going with this development process where I think of a little bit and then I kind of like and so right now I'm actually like in the development of the world. I'm actually in like a kind of a low point where the ideas have kind of I won't say fallen asleep, that might be a little bit too poetic, but
Hmm.
have kind of just settled into a spot where to bring them back up would involve quite a bit of effort to kind of bring them and really
Yeah, yeah,
start
yeah.
developing them again.
Well, I think that's kind of the best way to do it. Actually, I was listening to a interview with a bunch of composers, and the composers were talking about the way they composed, and one of them was like, "Yeah, when I think of ideas, I write them down." And the other one said something I thought was super interesting, where they said like, "I don't write anything down because if I don't remember it, it's not interesting." And I mean, that may not be correct, but it's like it's interesting, like allowing your own mind to figure it out by like, because this is what I did with computer programming, is I worked on a bunch of different concepts, but then the concepts that just sort of like stuck over time, I'm like, those ideas are actually, there's something there that it's not going away. And is that maybe similar to what you do a bit where like, am I understanding correctly that you kind of were working on a bunch of different stories? Like you maybe did a bunch of different things, and then this is there's elements to this where there's things that are persistent where you've you've kind of help, stayed with an idea for a while.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, they didn't necessarily cross over into each other and to become kind of like, oh, these ideas are the particular ones that keep coming back throughout every story. But particularly, this story is actually quite old in its development, in the sense that it actually started many years ago when I had drawn something for somebody. And then to
Right.
draw that picture, I had a story in mind, and then it kind of sat on the shelf. And then I did something else in this world, and then I realized I keep revisiting this world. I need to start building it. I need to start making it into a fleshed out, uh, wider expanse than what I've been doing. And then I've tried doing that and I've worked on it, but then now it's kind of reached that point of putting it back on the shelf and letting it sit for a little bit.
Are
Like I've
there
yeah.
are there allegoric or metaphorical elements to it?
Yes.
Okay, can you
Yes.
maybe explain some of those?
Hmm. I think
Like I know you did, like the shadow is an example of
yeah,
that, but I
yeah.
I just find like to me that's
Hmm.
one of the most interesting things in writing is that kind of
Right.
yeah.
And so then I think the easiest one to tell you about is the idea of right you got the firefly, the lightning bug, and the starlight, right? The starlight is the special one. Well, technically they're all special, but that one in particular, because the idea behind that one is like you catch the fireflies in the jar, right? And so you want to, and so then, and because it represents, because its literal name is starlight and it zips across your field of view as if it were a shooting star, then if you can catch one, then that kind of represents the miracle of having a wish come true. And so then in the
Oh,
story, if there's something, if there's gonna be when there's gonna be that scene where somebody just sees it and something happens, then that would be a magical moment. Like not
see,
just because of the fantastical, but because of the actual experience of it.
that is very, very cool. I suddenly see now what you're saying when you say like it's a mix between the dream world and then the actual world, where that's a dream motif
Hmm.
commonly understood, like the shooting star. So you actually can embody that. That's really interesting. I think you like we should be writing partners. I don't write, but we should talk about writing. I learned that C.S. Lewis and like you maybe know this, J.R.R. Tolkien did that, right? They would
Uh,
talk.
oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, but
Totally.
I think um Tolkien was actually a little bit miffed at C.S. Lewis because he felt like he stole his ideas. That's what I heard.
Oh. Well, I mean, if somebody stole my ideas, then then what I would tell them is like, well, you better make them better than I can. If you're gonna steal it, you got to make it better than what I can do. If you steal it and you make it worse, then I'm gonna be very mad at you. I'm gonna be very angry. It's like, if you're gonna steal it, you gotta be better than me then.
You're not concerned about people stealing your ideas?
Um, legally, kind of, but if they can make it better, I would clap. I would say congratulations. That's pretty amazing.
That's kind of my perspective too. It's like if I'm making something that's actually valuable, and somebody steals it and they create it instead of me, then I'm happy with that because I wanted that thing to exist anyways. So
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Because if they're gonna steal, then that means that they see value in it, and if they see value in it, see what would make me more conceptually upset about it would be if they take something that I wrote, but then they change the heart and the spirit of it. Like, let's say I'm writing this out of passion. I'm writing a story out of passion and love for the idea and the characters, but then they take it and then they just kind of turn it into a money making thing.
Mhm.
Okay, then now I've got a problem with you. Now I'm going to be like, okay, yeah, you don't steal my stuff for that purpose, please.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely makes sense. What do you think about the industry of art, like, right now, the state it's in? Because I feel like that's a lot of what happens is that artists, you know, like, really it feels like most artists aren't really artists. They're people who try to generate, money through
Mm,
entertainment.
right. What I think about that. I mean, honestly, it makes me a little bit sad on the inside a little bit that the concept of art has gotten to that point when people will get into it thinking that it's good for money or good for something like that.
Mhm,
But then the people who are most well known for their art, I don't think they got into it for that reason. Like the people who have produced the best things and the things that have become timeless and really like influential are the people who did it out of their heart and interest and their just utter enamoration or in the just with the thing that they were creating. And so then I feel that kind of it's not like it's like it gets to the point of being called grief about just the way that things have been devolving into. It's not a passion anymore. It's just everybody's doing it, but who's really doing it for that deep purpose? I'm not sure.
do you have, do you come across artwork that you find inspiring where you're like, "That feels like it's actually art done from that proper place?"
Yeah, I have come across a few people like that where I feel that they've put the effort in where it's like they put the effort in to bring their ideas to fruition rather than mere because there's no other reason for them to have put that much effort into it if
Mhm.
they're yeah
You can, like, feel
it's
the
like
love in it, like, the kind of just, like, the
the
yeah.
attention to detail, the
Mhm,
attention to building the entire thing up, and it's just not one-off thing, or it's not some kind of and like that's kind of like the downside of having the structure to art is because when people think that it's formulaic or when people think that it's you could just kind of put things together just like one after the other, then that just reduces the inherent art of it, I guess you could say. But
mhm.
then yeah, and so then there's like a different realm to having the structure to art, but then not having the structure to art, where the people who are really inspired to make the art, aren't going to have the structure, and then they're able to just produce and do amazing things with it, but then all within that realm of structure. Like they're able to do something with that structure that's beyond the scope of the structure.
What do you think the best way to enable actual artists is? Because, um, in some ways, the way media transfer works, the non-artist oftentimes has a better shot at it because the non-artist's approach is, "I'm going to copy, generate as much content as I can, and just but the thing is that it works very well because they're able to hit the market with so much more stuff as opposed to meaningful stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest questions about the entire realm of art is how do you compete with the quantity? How can quality compete with quantity and speed and that ability to market it a certain way? And I guess that really ties into the issues with AI art or AI assisted writing, especially in the fields of prose and visual art, is that it's just so fast that you can't keep up, and it's able to do things intricately, especially with the visuals, intricately, not well, but intricately enough so that people can be uh, kind of, I guess, tricked into thinking that it's good. And so how can we prevent, or not really prevent, but because I don't think outlawing AI is going to work, and I don't think telling people, "Oh, you shouldn't do it," and shaming people for doing AI is going to work either. And I don't think that it's possible to properly compete with the people who go for the quantity over the quality. So that's the question. Like, how do we, how can it be possible to make it so that, and or as you put it, like enable these artists who really value this medium to do what they can do? And I don't have an answer for that because of the time and the quantity. It just takes time because we're not in the age anymore where everybody is taking a certain amount of time and then you can get an idea out first. Like maybe in the past it would have been if you can get out your idea first, and then that will become the foundation for the era, so to speak. Now it's more of a nobody's the foundation of an era, but we're in this trend setting viewpoint of the world. Like if I can have my, the phrase is 15 minutes of fame, then then I've been successful. But and so then I feel like in that way, then the answer would have to do with changing, reverting in a way the mindset of the general population back into a mindset where you're not trying to gain something, you're trying to give something.
That's
And
very interesting. Wait, what do you mean
yeah,
by not trying to gain something, trying to give something?
because when you're making something from your heart and you're giving it out to people, then you're not really thinking about uh receiving anything back, but you just want to see somebody's reaction, or you just want to, maybe in that way you could see that as gain, but I don't see that as gain. I want to just see people's reaction to it. I want them to receive something well and nice, and whether that's joy or whether that's respect or love or anything like that, then my focus, my primary focus is to give that person. And I'm not thinking about the gain. Like if I make money, cool. That's like benefit, I guess. I guess that's a thing. But my primary focus is this is an idea. Here, have it.
Hmm. I wonder if um, making people smarter, almost making people like increasing the intelligence of the world will help in that because like bad art is essentially doing the exact opposite of what good art is doing. Bad art is like um it's okay, I just said disconnected. Like its entire goal is to keep people distracted, give them as little value as possible, and then take their time. It's essentially that's the entire goal of it versus good art is meant to give people as much as possible for their time. And I wonder if people eventually just start to see through bad art and just are not interested in it because that's what happened to me. It's like I used to kind of like be interested in various things, and then now I just see through it instantly. I'm just like, there's nothing there, and I'm more interested only in like actual value. So I wonder if even like Peterson Academy can have this effect where people